The feel is real. Today, I want to encourage you guys to tap in and lean into using perceived exertions in your training sessions and not just relying on the data that we can collect through our watches and programs such as Training Peaks. So, we live in a very data driven society and we've got access to a lot of good technology and information. And we've got tools and programs that then analyze that information and tell us how well we're going. But as a result of that, there's a bit of a lost art in terms of just tapping into and dialing into the feel. And ultimately, the feel is real. So you want to be understanding your RPE. You want to be understanding how you're feeling when you're training and racing, and then using that information and using that feedback and using that feel, marrying that up with the data and making sure you are on the right track. So using the data and the physiology and the science and the information as a tool, which we are lucky to have at our disposal, but making sure that we're not losing sight of that ability to tap into the feelings and feedback that the body is providing to us. So at Jet Coaching, we use a simple intensity scale. So it's a zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe into a 6, which has been likened to manual gearbox in a car. Now, obviously, as you're working through the gears and intensities, you're obviously working harder. Now, often in training session prescription, we'll use percentages or even descriptive words such as moderate or strong or very strong or best effort. This is all about encouraging you to actually think about how you're feeling and not just be tied to numbers and data and information that's available through your watch. So by all means, yes, I want you to use the data. I want you to make sure that in terms of physiology, we're using that information and that tool. But before you get there, we want to be making sure you're actually executing the sessions in line with the intent in which they were written. And a lot of that comes from dialing in and tapping into that feel. And the feel is real. So for example, a race feel effort, that should be done by feeling like putting yourself into race day or halfway through the bike on race day, for example, and actually feeling the things you feel and actually making sure you're engaged enough in the session and you're executing it with intent. And that goes by actually being realistic and honest, but you need to be concentrating on what you're doing. And we already know if you're concentrating and focused on a session, you're going to get the most out of it, whether it's a 20-minute session or a 2.5-hour session. Being concentrating on the task at hand and being engaged in the process, but then also marrying up with the intent of the session that you're doing is going to have far-reaching benefits. After the session, by all means, or even during the session, check in on and make sure and note what your heart rate is. But if you genuinely feel like it's a race effort for a 40k time trial, for example, or an Olympic distance race, and you feel like the effort you're doing is what you're doing, then keep going and just take note of your heart rate, take note of your power. And then if you're doing several of them or you're doing a similar session over an extended period of time leading into a race, you start to identify trends, but at least you can have that feeling. And then when you are racing, you can tap into that feel as well. And again, potentially using the data, the heart rate data or the power data, that feedback as additional information. And then over time, you're identifying trends. So essentially what I'm saying is don't just be a slave to the number. If a session calls for 4 by 5 minute efforts progressing from 1 to 4 in terms of intensity, first one being zone 2 and the last one being zone 5, go and feel that session. Go and do that session without looking at your watch, and then progress through it. It's a skill, and it's an art, but it's something that can be practiced, and it's something that will improve your performance because you're actually more engaged and dialed into what your body is doing and what the body's telling you. And it frees you up from the data and the numbers and the information and allows you to just go and run and go and ride and go and swim, and it helps us be a bit more primal, which is how we're all designed. So by all means, yes, use the data. We will always use the data. We do heart rate tests. We've got Training Peaks as our program of choice. We'll use time cycles in the pool, but you'll very rarely, if ever, see a run set description where you're actually running at a set pace. And one of the reasons for that is I think it goes both ways. So one, you can really be a slave to those numbers, and if you're not hitting the numbers, it's supposedly a poorly executed session. But on the flip side, you're often potentially holding you back. You're restricting yourself to, 5-minute K pace, whereas you may actually be capable of doing, 440 pace, for example. So I think it goes both ways. There's lots of value in all of the information that we have access to, but there's a lot more value in being in tune with your body and in tune with the intensities and in tune with the program and the session descriptions, and find the enjoyment and find the value in and the challenge in trying to execute sessions whilst being dialed into the feeling as well. So the feel is real. Think about it. Give it a go. Talk to you soon. Cheers.